Hello, everyone, and welcome back to week 2 of our Rhythm series at Mission Church. I'm Pastor Kyle, and we're so glad that you're with us. This week, we're talking all about journaling as a rhythm that we can build into our spiritual lives. This discipline of recording a record of some of the things God is doing in our lives is going to help us to grow in powerful ways. So we are so glad that you're here. You know, the Bible doesn't really command us to do journaling, but all over the Bible, there's examples of people who were men and women of faith who journaled. And all throughout the history of Christianity, there are great Christians who spent time recording their journey with God and their growth and their steps with Jesus. So we believe journaling is such an important aspect. In fact, one of the reasons we wanted to do journaling here at the very front of this series is we believe it will play a role throughout the entire process. Because as we get into some of the other spiritual disciplines in the series, we're going to encourage you to write in your journal the things that God is teaching you through everything you're experiencing. Now, I want to set up our time a little bit through a passage of scripture in the Old Testament. It's from the book of Joshua. So if you have a Bible and you want to turn there with me, it's going to be in Joshua chapter 4. And one of the things that is happening in Joshua is it's this pivotal time in the history of the nation of Israel. You see, for 400 years, they were in bondage in the land of Egypt, suffering until God sent them a deliverer, Moses, to lead them out of slavery in the land of Egypt. And then for 40 years, they wandered in the wilderness, waiting for their time to enter into the promised land that God was going to give them. Finally, in the book of Joshua, you have this transition of leadership where Moses is stepping aside and Joshua is God's new man to lead them into the promised land and all the blessings that he has for them. And here in Joshua chapter 4, they're literally standing on the brink of the promised land. The border was the Jordan River, and they're waiting to cross over the Jordan River to take possession of the land that God has given them. And God just does an amazing miracle. He has these priests carry the Ark of the Covenant, and they walk into the Jordan River, and they stand in the middle of this river. If you've ever been to Israel or seen pictures, it's a massive river. The priests walk into the river, and God causes all the water to stop so that the entire nation of Israel could walk across into the promised land on dry ground. This was a huge moment in the life of the nation of Israel. And I want you to see what God challenges them to do in this moment, because I think it's going to teach us something important about journaling. Listen with me as I read from Joshua chapter 4, starting in verse 1. It says, "When all the nations had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, 'Take 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight.'" And skip down to verse 6. It says, "This may be a sign among you. When your children ask in times to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So the stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and they took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. Now, jump down to verse 20, and we'll see the conclusion to this. It says, "Those 12 stones, which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, 'When your children ask of their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know that Israel passed over this Jordan River on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. See, God encouraged the people of Israel to do something significant on this day in their history. He challenged one man from each of the 12 tribes of Israel to take up a stone. It's probably a much larger stone than this one, but each one of these men took a stone, and Joshua literally set up an altar with these 12 stones, a pile of rocks in Gilgal, which is just over the side of the Jordan River. And Joshua told the people that from here on, when their children and their grandchildren would ask them, "Grandpa, what is this pile of stones sitting here?" That would be a memory aid, a device, a picture, literally, of God's faithfulness to the people of Israel in the past. It would commemorate not only the crossing of the Jordan River, but going back to their release from slavery out of Egypt when God parted the waters of the Red Sea and allowed the people of Israel to go past on dry land. It was an amazing opportunity. You see, these stones were a memorial. They were a picture, a living history book that would declare the faithfulness and the goodness of God. Over and over, Joshua says here in this passage that this would be a sign among you in verse 6. And then in verse 7, he says, "These stones will be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." This was a lasting legacy. It was a record of God's faithfulness, a way of remembering what God had done and how he had been faithful to his people. You see, in many ways, a journal can provide the same help to us in our spiritual journey. Just as the people of Israel set up the stones as a memory device to remember God's faithfulness, a journal can be a place where you record your spiritual journey with God. A journal helps you to slow down in your life. How many of us know that in today's culture with all of the phones and the texting and the apps and everything that's distracting us all the time in our lives, we need things to help us slow down. We need things to help us be intentional. We need things that cause us to reflect, to think deeply. And journaling is one of those things. It challenges us to reflect, to slow down, to realize the important things that God is doing. It gives us an opportunity, just as the Israelites set up these 12 stones, to write down and record the things that God is doing in our lives, the times of God's faithfulness. You see, you and I, we're so prone to forget. We're prone to forget when God answers prayers. We're prone to forget the times that he's moved in our behalf, the times when we've seen him so clearly at work in our lives. We are prone to forget the things that God is teaching us. And so I want to challenge you over these next 8 or 10 weeks during the Rhythm series to try your hand at journaling. Now, I know for some of you, this is a big step. You're saying, "Pastor, I've never done journaling before. I don't even know where to start. I'm new at this whole thing." And I know that some of you are kind of maybe reacting to that challenge a little bit, but I want to encourage you that over the next 10 weeks, we're going to do journaling together. Now, you may at some point decide that journaling is not for you, but my hope and prayer is that over these 10 weeks, you'll see the way that God uses this rhythm in your life to encourage you and to shape your journey with Jesus. Now, I want to say a special word of encouragement to the guys in the house. You know, sometimes journaling or keeping a diary is something we think only girls are doing. But here's the thing. Many men of faith throughout history have recorded journals and records of God's faithfulness. And it's amazing to look back and see how God worked in the hearts and lives of men. These men were world changers, men who stood for God in their generation, who were faithful. And God used them in a powerful way. So even the guys, I want to challenge you to step up and to practice and try this discipline of journaling. You see, you'll never know if it's going to work for you unless you try it out. So let's step into this challenge together. Now, I want to give you a few tips and some encouragement about journaling as we begin the process. These are some practical things that I hope will help you as you begin keeping a record of your own spiritual journey. The first thing I want you to know is there's not a right or a wrong way to do journaling. You see, journaling is one of those things that whatever works for you is the way you should do it. So I want you to experiment, to try a few different ways of seeing what fits best for you. Now, the first step that you need to do is you need to choose a journal. Now, you might want to choose a notebook or even loose leaf paper, or you might want to get a fancier journal. You know, I've got one here that I've bought over the years and used on different mission trips and things to record some reflections that God has done in my life. And I've also just used simple spiral notebooks like this one to kind of help as a way of reflecting and recording my journey with God. Some people like to use notebook paper. You know, there's plenty of options out there, but we want to encourage you during this series, start with the Rhythms journal that we've provided, but you may want to add an additional journal to help you continue this discipline throughout the series. Now, the second thing I want to encourage you is if you're not a pen and paper kind of person, you might want to choose a digital option for journaling. There's dozens of apps and programs that you can use to help you with your journaling. In the past, I've used an app called Penzu that you can download to your phone. You can use it on your desktop computer, and it's a great way to record what God's doing in your life. You can share those things. You can email them. You can always go back and look at those things, and you can index them all with keywords. So it's a really powerful way to do that. And if digital is your way of doing that, then I want to encourage you to try a digital journaling option. One thing that I've learned over the years trying different ways is you have to find what works best for you. For me, there's something about pen and paper. There's something about taking my thoughts and writing them by hand on a piece of paper and having that as a record. And so that's the method that I prefer to use, but maybe you'll choose a different method, and that's great for you. Now, the second step that I want to encourage you to take is to set a time and a place for journaling. If we're not intentional about this, it's never going to happen. And so I want to encourage you to choose a place where you can have some solitude and to choose a specific time where you know that you can meet with God and you can reflect on some of your thoughts. So pick a time and a place. Schedule it in your calendar if you have to. Make it a point. You know, for me, in the mornings when I have my devotional time with the Lord, I like to journal for just a few moments after I'm finished reading the Bible and spending time in prayer. I like to think about some key thoughts for the day. I'll write down a passage of scripture that really God used to speak to my heart that day, or to write a reflection of something that God is teaching me that day. And that helps kind of set the tone for my entire day that day. And so I want to encourage you to set a time and a place when you can practice the rhythm of journaling. Finally, I want to encourage you to commit to journaling regularly. This is something you need to do on a consistent basis if you're going to get the most benefit out of it. Now, you don't have to journal every single day or be legalistic about it. You know, it's one of those things where I try to journal on a consistent basis, but I don't make it every day. And you know what? I don't beat myself up over it or get upset. I just pick it up the next day and keep moving forward. The reality is you don't have to write these long paragraphs and pages and books. You might even want to just write one or two sentences as a reflection on something that God is teaching you in your journey with Him. The most important part of journaling is to reflect, to take that time to pause, to ask God, what are you teaching me? What can I write down and remember that I need to focus on? There's something about that discipline of taking what's happening in our mind and our heart and putting it on paper. There's an opportunity to come back to it later, to reflect on God's faithfulness. And just as the Israelites piled up those 12 stones as a record, a living history book of God's faithfulness in their life, I believe that your journal in the days to come will become that same record that God will use to remind you of the ways that He's answered prayers, the ways that He's spoken to you, the ways that He's encouraged you, the ways that He's challenged you, and to see your growth and development in your relationship with Jesus. It's going to be a powerful tool for you. So don't miss this opportunity. In fact, this week in your devotions, there's going to be several opportunities for you to journal and write down your thoughts. And there'll be some prompts in your Rhythms journal to help you get started, to know what to write about and what to journal on. And we hope you'll take advantage of that and come back to your small group next week with an opportunity to share what God is teaching you as you build a lasting memorial of God's faithfulness in your own journey. May God bless you in the process.